First off, I want to thank the brave men and women who work behind the wall. I want to thank them on a national level because their job goes unrecognized.
How do they try to turn a guard?
Well, correctional officer. Sorry, I apologize. But correctional officer. How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Ganji, host of Tier Talk. Great video done by Russ today in regards to emergency response. He breaks it down from the primary to the observer to the people that come directly and respond that didn't observe, but they're called to the scene. Russ, you outdid yourself on this video. Definitely a lot of good, needed information, especially in regards to how we now respond, where we should be at. I mean, obviously, corrections is evolving, but are they giving us the tools we need to properly fend for the safety of ourselves, the safety of other inmates, the safety for the facility as a whole? And I think this video will open up a lot of eyes. When we come back from our sponsor, I'm going to give the video over to Russ. Russ, again, great job. Now, if you guys haven't, the show Tier Talks for you, brave men and women that work in corrections. So please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. The bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. When you guys get a chance, please share the content as well on your social media site. We're trying to get to that 20,000 mark, and we'll get there. Trust and believe we'll get there. All right, we'll go to our sponsor. When we come back, I give the show over to Russ. Stand by.
I wanted to attend a university that had an intelligence program. I wanted to look at problems different. I wanted to increase my critical thinking abilities. AMU offered those avenues to expand. Obtaining your degree as an adult, you're actually paying yourself and investing in yourself. You can't put a dollar on it, it's priceless. It's something that can never be taken away from you.
American Military University. Learn from the leader.
Hey there guys, Russ Hamilton from Keepers of Chaos here. Anyway, if you've seen the last couple of videos that I did with Tier Talk, you would notice that we're really kind of touching on some of the basic things that happen, or really rather should be happening during alarm response. And so what I wanted to do is I kind of wanted to go over that in a little bit more of a substantial manner and talk about what should be happening during any given alarm response. Because what we've got going across the country is we've got a whole bunch of different facilities that are doing things a whole bunch of different ways. And while there's nothing inherently wrong necessarily with each of those, a lot of them really aren't getting to the crux of what it takes to have an effective alarm response. So I'm just going to talk about some of those things and what I like to see. Now, if I miss anything or if anyone has some different ideas or something, go ahead and chime in and let's talk about them down below. But what I'm going to talk about this is in the sense of how the evolution occurs once an alarm is initiated. Okay. So that's the basis from where we're going to start from. So anyway, needless to say, every great incident starts with, what is it basically? Some kind of an alarm. Basically, when you're involved in corrections, you're going to see incidents happen from three different perspectives, right? And those three different perspectives are basically, if you're the primary, all right? And that means that the incident is happening to you or in a spot very close to you where you're proximate to that point. And so you're initially the one there. Maybe you're able to sound an alarm, push a personal alarm device, make some sort of transmission on the radio, call for help, whatever it is. Maybe you're not able to do any of those things. Maybe you're busy defending yourself or defending someone else, and that isn't quite happening at that point. So that's being right there, and when you're considered to be the primary person that's on the scene. All right. The next distance back from that just a little bit is if you were an observer, someone who sees this maybe on a TV monitor, maybe across the yard, maybe from an elevated position like in a tower or some sort of gun thing. And that would be from the point of you see it, you're going to get on your radio and, announce that this incident or whatever is happening. And then the third position where you would end up being involved in this kind of thing is if you were a responder to it. You're not at the site, you're not observing or witnessing the site, and you're simply being told to respond to it, whether that's via radio or a phone call or some other method of notification. So essentially, those three things, a primary, observer, a responder. If you're the primary, the main thing that you're having to worry about at that moment is usually, getting that alarm signal out and doing whatever you can to deploy whatever equipment you've got, whatever amount of limited resources that you have. Sometimes these two things will overlap. If you're that observer / witness kind of thing, and you see it on, whether it's on a monitor or from an elevated position or from across the yard or whatever, what you want to be doing in that case is you want to be doing more than just announcing what the alarm is, but you also want to kind of be, giving some information, how many inmates are involved, who's there, what type of attack is it. Maybe you're even able to identify, which two factions it is, or whether it's, staff assault, any of those things. So that way, people that are in charge of measuring that response, they know what they need to send then at that point. And then the point where you're at the responder stage, where you haven't seen this thing, you're not proximate to it, you're just being sent. Hopefully you're hearing that on your radio. Hopefully you're getting kind of a little bit of an idea. You should also be knowing what you should be picking up along the way, in the form of equipment and whatnot. So that's the basic start of this whole evolutionary chain that we've started in order to get the response there. Now, one thing that I've seen that's been really disturbing in some of these things that have happened are some policy failures, right? And one of the policy failures that I tend to see most often, although it's kind of hard to tell if it's a policy failure or if it's a failure on the part of the inmates, but it seems to me that it's a policy failure, is that uninvolved groups, uninvolved inmates, and are just meandering about doing whatever they want while there's a critical incident right there going on. I mean, they're doing things like, you picking up books off the table and walking across the yard and doing all this. What is that all about, people? When you have an alarm in a unit, everyone should be hitting the deck. Everyone, at least that's an inmate, should be hitting the deck. They should be down. They should be immobile. And the reason for that is because if they are up and moving around, then they're obviously involved, right? There's no gray lines there. We're not worried about, some guy, looking like he's not doing anything and he's harmless and walking by and passing off a shank, hiding a shank, providing more shanks out, whatever the case may be. So I don't know what all these different institutions are doing with regard to that. And, I'd like some input. This is a thing where that really needs to change. If that's your particular department or facility's idea about what response is, you can't be having that. There's too many things that can go wrong in a situation like that. Okay, so now that we've talked a little bit about the basics of how this thing starts to evolve, and I apologize for only being able to kind of generalize here and stuff, but there's just so many variations that I can't get too specific in all of that. But one of the most important things to consider in alarm response is the length of your supply chain and resources. What does he mean by that? Okay, so basically you've got two types of resources for the most part when you're getting response going. You've got personnel and you've got equipment, right? And one of the things that I see happening in a lot of these departments and stuff is their chain from the beginning of needing those things as a resource to getting them. The supply chain is just incredibly long. And there doesn't seem to be any real sense in that to me. One of the things that, as a prime example of it, is a failure of the officers that are there on the front line, the first initial immediate responders of this thing, is that they don't have any equipment or they don't have the right equipment. Basically, when you've got a body there, that body only has a span of control that's just so large. And you know what? If you're really lucky, it's, one per one officer per one inmate that's getting out of line. And that's about the best you can hope for, unless they're properly equipped, right? And so what you want to do is, if you're creating policy and procedure and stuff, you want each and every officer out there that's initially responding right there to be as much of a force multiplier as they can be. force multiplier just means this, is that they have sufficient equipment to proactively and preemptively stop an incident, even in its critical phase many times. And so, the primary things that you really need is, first, you need a level of protection for that officer. Everyone should have a vest. No ifs, ands, or buts. The second thing that everybody needs is a baton. You need an impact weapon, because an impact weapon is great because it doesn't what? It doesn't ever run out of the ammo that's feeding it, which are your arms, right? So if worse comes to worse, you can still keep that thing going and in gear. And the other thing that you really need is you need at least one, if not more, like MK9 is the minimum size I would recommend for OC. I've seen some of these other guys, they can have little MK3 OC pepper projectors. What is that going to do? I mean, that's like, 1 or 2 shots on a couple of guys. It's not optimal. You may as well go in for the big MK9 where you can, disperse that amongst, 5, 10, 15 guys that are all in some little clumped up ball. And then the next thing, ideally, that you would have are some chemical agents in the form of some sort of dispersal grenade, right? And then on top of that, all the other little accoutrements that you would normally have, some handcuffs, some zip ties, some things like that, to get you through, especially that first initial stage. Because when I talk to some of these guys and stuff, I say, you ask them, ask them, do you guys have chemical agents? Yeah. Go, well, how do you go about deploying them? Well, our tactical team comes in. Well, how long does it take for a tactical team to get assembled? Instead of just having 3 or 4 officers right there that amongst them have, 8 or 10 grenades and 3, 4, 5 MK9 pepper assault projectors and some zip ties and some cuffs. How much faster can you start and get to the end of your evolution, which is cleanup and mop-up operations? Well, a whole lot faster, obviously. So what we've done is, by putting everyone out there and making them a force multiplier, you've shortened your chain on getting those things done by a whole lot. It happens a whole lot faster. And this does some other great things too. It actually can be, preventative. It keeps inmates from, thinking that they're going to get away with what they're going to get away with. So don't knock it. Having all that stuff, in there and right there with you is a great thing. As you proceed down that chain away from your first initial response there too, the next thing that you need some things that are even bigger on the force multiplier scale. That goes just beyond the MK9s and some, chemical grenades and things like that. You need some more horsepower in it. So what you want those people doing is you want the next wave of people that are going to be coming in with things like 40 millimeter and 40 millimeter projectiles, where they have baton rounds, direct impact rounds, maybe some chemical munitions and things like that. Because at that point, if they've made it there by that time, well, guess what? It's on to the point that all that stuff is going to be needed. Again, this secondary wave of response, not your tactical teams, right? These are guys that have just been in the area that would normally respond to this. And where are they getting this stuff from? They're getting it from some, decentralized locations, some armory lockers where all they have to do is stop by and grab this and go. And I saw on one of the alarm responses that I did the other day at the, I think it was the Sousa Baranowski one, they had a good number of guys showing up, right? And kudos to them for, getting right in there and stopping all that. But no one was showing up with anything extra. I mean, they didn't have any pepper spray. They didn't have any batons. They weren't bringing in any 40 millimeters. They weren't bringing in any Mark 48s, the big fire extinguisher size OC. And so if this had been a protracted incident that was lasting longer and involving more inmates and those officers were in a bind there, they might have been much more limited on being able to rescue them. Now, it turned out good for them just like that. But when you're able to show up with this extra gear, once again, you shorten that supply chain on your resources and everything's right there and no one's waiting around. There is no waiting for that go signal. Go is from the get-go, from the instant it starts. and you're bringing all of that stuff to bear. Yeah, it's great to have, you know, a CRT team, and my hat goes off to those guys that train and do that extra stuff. But for the most part, if possible, you want to make activating those guys unnecessary, because that's when really bad things have happened. And we've got staff that are, you know, dying in the process and stuff. Anyway, these are just my thoughts on this subject. And this is just the basic, most bare bones of this subject. But it's something that needs to be said, because it seems like there's a lot of facilities out there that just aren't even thinking about how to shorten that chain on those things, and how to get the right tools and equipment there, how to get the right personnel there, and how to deploy it in a way that's going to save lives. And I'm not talking just about staff, although that's primarily what I'm mostly interested in, is keeping staff safe, but it also makes the inmates safer, you know? And when you've made your whole institution safer, what else have you done? You've lessened the exposure of liability. You've decreased the number of medical dollars that they're going to expend wiring these inmates' jaws, you know, back shut, and all the excess overtime that goes on out there when you're having to send guys out to cover inmates that are in the ICU and things like that. So this is just some stuff that I want everyone to take to heart and mull over and start making these changes. These changes are important to do things like this, so that we're not caught flat-footed, and so that we do have an effective, timely response that just, you know, basically doesn't kid around, right? Anyway, I hope everyone has gotten something out of this. I'd really love to hear your thoughts on the subject. Maybe you've got something more and beyond this. Maybe your department is even further ahead. When I first started in all this, everything was all about a dog pile at the end of whatever was going on. And people were getting hurt in the dog pile, and there was no real thought to, you know, how we were doing the evolution of the response and all this stuff. We didn't have the 40 millimeters. We didn't have gas. We did have batons, but that was about it. So anyway, things got better. Things evolved. Tactics changed. The equipment got better. We started adding the vests, the MK9s, and you know what? We got a lot less staff hurt, and we probably got a lot less inmates hurt in the process. So anyway, this is Russ Hamilton for Keepers of Chaos, signing out, telling you all to stay safe, stay frosty. I'll see you on the next video.